The crisp ivory envelope sat on her kitchen counter for 3 days before Olivia finally worked up the courage to open it. Her fingers trembled as she read the elegant script announcing her ex-fiancé's wedding to the woman he'd left her for just 8 months ago. She knew attending would look desperate to everyone who'd witnessed their messy breakup, yet something inside her refused to hide away like she had something to be ashamed of. The wedding would be at the Grand Plaza, the same venue they had once toured together when planning their own future. The dress she chose was a calculated risk, crimson silk that hugged her curves and demanded attention, without crossing into inappropriate territory. As she slipped it on, Olivia reminded herself this wasn't about winning him back, but proving she had moved on. Her best friend Claire had offered to accompany her as moral support, but Olivia declined. This was a battle she needed to face alone, a final step toward closing that painful chapter of her life once and for all. The taxi pulled up to the gleaming high-rise hotel, its windows reflecting the setting sun like sheets of gold. Through the revolving doors, chandeliers sparkled overhead, while waiters glided through the crowd with champagne flutes balanced on silver trays. At the reception desk, Olivia gave her name and received a table assignment that made her stomach sink. She was seated with distant acquaintances, people who barely knew her. The message couldn't have been clearer. She was an afterthought, invited out of obligation rather than desire. The ballroom took her breath away despite herself, with cascading white flowers and crystal accents transforming the space into a winter wonderland. It was exactly the vision she had once shared with him, now brought to life for another woman. Olivia accepted a glass of champagne from a passing server and scanned the room, immediately spotting her ex across the crowd. He looked handsome in his tuxedo, laughing easily with his groomsmen, as if this were any ordinary celebration. The moment their eyes met across the room, Olivia felt a chill run down her spine. His smile faltered for just a second before he whispered something to his new bride and began making his way toward her, wearing that practiced charm she once mistook for sincerity. As guests filtered into their assigned seats for dinner, Olivia found herself alone at a table for 8, the other chairs conspicuously empty. She sipped her champagne slowly, wondering if this seating arrangement was a cruel joke or simple oversight. "Table for the unwanted," she muttered to herself, scrolling through her phone to avoid making eye contact with passing guests. The pitying glances from former friends stung worse than outright hostility would have. Wedding toasts began at the head table, forcing Olivia to watch as her ex gazed adoringly at his new wife. Each word about finding true love felt like a deliberate reminder of her own inadequacy, of not being enough to hold his interest. The empty chairs around her table remained vacant even as dinner was served, confirming her suspicion that this wasn't an accident, but a calculated humiliation. Olivia considered leaving, her appetite gone and dignity hanging by a thread. Just as she reached for her purse, planning her escape, a deep voice spoke from behind her. "Is this seat taken?" he asked, gesturing to the chair beside hers with a confidence that suggested he already knew the answer. His presence commanded attention. Tailored suit that whispered of wealth, dark eyes that missed nothing, and an air of authority that made nearby conversations falter. Without waiting for her response, he sat down beside her and signaled for the waiter. "I'm Dominic," he said simply, no last name offered as he studied her with undisguised interest. There was something dangerous in his gaze, something that made her simultaneously want to lean closer and run for the exit. Olivia introduced herself, surprised by how steady her voice sounded despite her inner turmoil. She noticed several guests watching their interaction with undisguised curiosity, whispers behind cocktail glasses following their every move. "Your ex seems particularly interested in our conversation," Dominic observed, nodding subtly toward the head table where her former fiancé was indeed watching them. "Care to dance and give him something worth staring at?" The dance floor was crowded enough to provide a semblance of privacy, as he led her through the waltz with unexpected grace. His hand at the small of her back was firm but respectful, guiding rather than controlling her movements. "You don't belong here," he said, his mouth close to her ear as they turned. It wasn't a question or criticism, just a statement of fact that somehow acknowledged the discomfort she'd been trying to hide all evening. Olivia tensed, wondering if he was about to suggest she leave, but his next words surprised her. "Neither of us does, but for entirely different reasons," he continued, his eyes scanning the room with practiced vigilance. She followed his gaze and noticed for the first time the subtle security presence around the perimeter of the ballroom. Men in dark suits with earpieces who seemed more focused on the guests than potential external threats. When the music ended, Dominic kept hold of her hand as he leaned closer. "The man by the east exit has been watching you since you arrived," he murmured, his lips barely moving. And he doesn't work for hotel security. A chill ran down Olivia's spine as she resisted the urge to turn and look. Why would anyone be watching me? She asked, trying to maintain her composure while her mind raced through possible explanations. That depends on what your ex is involved in, Dominic replied cryptically, guiding her toward the bar with a protective hand at her elbow. And why he insisted you be here tonight, despite obviously wanting to humiliate you. At the bar, Dominic ordered drinks without consulting her preferences, somehow selecting exactly what she would have chosen. As he handed her the glass, his fingers brushed hers deliberately, the touch sending unexpected warmth through her veins. Her ex chose that moment to approach, his new bride conspicuously absent, as he slid into the space beside Olivia, with forced casualness. "I'm glad you could make it," he said, his eyes darting suspiciously between her and Dominic. "Wouldn't miss it," Olivia replied with practiced brightness, acutely aware of Dominic watching this exchange with calculating eyes. The tension between the men was immediate and palpable, like predators assessing each other's strengths. The bride appeared suddenly, all smiles as she linked her arm possessively through her new husband's. "We haven't been properly introduced," she said to Dominic, ignoring Olivia completely, as she extended her hand with obvious interest. Dominic's response was polite but dismissive, his attention returning to Olivia as soon as propriety allowed. The couple retreated after an awkward moment, leaving behind an atmosphere thick with unspoken questions. "Your ex seems nervous," Dominic observed once they were alone again, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Interesting that he invited his former fiancée to his wedding, then isolated her, only to get territorial when another man approaches. Olivia sipped her drink, considering this assessment against her own knowledge of her ex. "What exactly do you do, Dominic?" she asked instead of responding directly, tired of feeling like she was the only one in the dark. His smile didn't reach his eyes as he leaned closer, his next words changing everything. "I'm the person your ex has been laundering money for without realizing who I really am," he whispered against her ear, "and I need you to act like you're with me." Olivia nearly dropped her glass, her mind struggling to process this revelation. "You're joking," she managed, searching his face for any sign that this was some elaborate prank or pickup line. The seriousness in his expression confirmed the truth as he continued. "I have reason to believe he's planning to frame you for his financial crimes if things go sideways. The lonely ex-fiancé, bitter and seeking revenge. You're the perfect scapegoat." "That's absurd," she protested, though doubt crept in as she recalled strange questions her ex had asked months ago about her banking passwords and access to her computer. "Why would you warn me? Why not just let him take the fall?" Dominic's gaze traveled over the crowded ballroom with practiced efficiency. "Because innocent people shouldn't pay for others' crimes," he answered, his voice hardening. "And because I need someone he trusts to help me confirm what he's done." Olivia felt dizzy with the implications, her safe, ordinary world tilting on its axis. "You're asking me to spy on my ex-fiancé for a self-proclaimed criminal?" she clarified, keeping her voice steady despite the absurdity. "I'm offering you protection from becoming collateral damage," he corrected, dark eyes holding hers. "Starting tonight, we're together as far as anyone here is concerned. It keeps you safe and gives me access to information I need." A waiter approached their table with fresh champagne, forcing a pause in their conversation. Olivia used the moment to study Dominic more carefully, noting the subtle deference the staff showed him despite his not being part of the wedding party. When they were alone again, she leaned forward with renewed determination. "Before I agree to anything, I need to know exactly who you are and what my ex has gotten himself involved in," she insisted, surprised by her own courage. "Fair enough," Dominic conceded, reaching for her hand across the table. "But this conversation should happen somewhere more private. Dance with me again, and then we'll find somewhere to talk properly." The music had shifted to something slower, and as they moved onto the dance floor, Dominic pulled her closer than before. "Follow my lead in every way," he murmured against her hair, his hold possessive enough to send a clear message to onlookers. Olivia felt eyes tracking their movement, including her ex's increasingly troubled gaze. Whatever game was being played here, she was suddenly a key piece rather than a spectator, and the realization was both terrifying and strangely exhilarating. Dominic's lips brushed her temple in what appeared to be an affectionate gesture, but was actually a whispered warning. "We're being watched by more than your ex now. Whatever you decide, don't leave this reception alone tonight." As the wedding reception wound down, Dominic guided Olivia through the hotel's opulent lobby toward a private elevator that required a keycard. His hand never left the small of her back, the pressure both reassuring and possessive to anyone watching. The penthouse suite they entered was clearly not a standard hotel room, with personalized touches suggesting Dominic maintained a permanent residence here. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of Manhattan's glittering skyline, the city lights spreading out beneath them like fallen stars. "I run several legitimate businesses," Dominic began, pouring them both drinks from a crystal decanter. "But my family has controlled certain aspects of this city's underground economy for 3 generations. Olivia accepted the glass but didn't drink, still processing the sudden shift in her reality. Just hours ago, her biggest concern had been surviving her ex's wedding with dignity and tact. Now she was standing in a mafia boss's penthouse discussing criminal conspiracies. "Your ex works at Kingston Financial where he manages private portfolios," Dominic continued, loosening his tie as he settled into a leather armchair. "For the past 18 months, he's been helping me move money through shell companies, believing he was working for a Russian oligarch. During these months, he'd maintained a separate phone and laptop specifically for these transactions, devices Olivia had glimpsed but never questioned. The pattern was clear now. His sudden insistence on privacy, the locked desk drawer, the calls he'd take only when alone. He created an elaborate digital footprint in your name," Dominic explained, showing her transaction records with timestamps corresponding to moments she'd been at work. Keystroke patterns, IP addresses, even your preferred banking hours, all meticulously crafted to withstand forensic analysis. His security team had intercepted communications between her ex and unknown associates, discussing contingency plans should their operation be discovered. Her name appeared repeatedly in these exchanges, always in the context of liability and distraction, rather than partnership. The realization hit Olivia like a physical blow. All those late nights her ex had claimed were for important clients, the sudden influx of cash that had funded their lavish lifestyle. She'd never questioned the source, accepting his vague explanations with trusting naivety. 2 months ago, he began skimming funds, Dominic said, watching her reaction carefully. "Not from me directly, but from the accounts he manages, taking enough to frame someone else while establishing his own offshore safety net." Olivia's hands trembled slightly as she set down her untouched drink. "And you think that someone is me?" she said, the pieces falling into place with sickening clarity. "The ex-fiancé with accounting experience and access to his personal devices." Dominic nodded, his expression grim, yet oddly compassionate. "Your name is already on several documents you never signed," he confirmed. "I discovered this when my security team flagged unusual account activities. The digital evidence was laid out on a laptop, forged signatures on offshore accounts, email correspondence supposedly from her IP address, even password reset confirmation sent to an email account using her name, but that she'd never seen before." "Why go to all this trouble?" Olivia asked, anger replacing her initial fear. "Why not just eliminate him if he's stealing from you?" The question left her lips before she could consider the implications of what she was actually suggesting. Something dark flashed in Dominic's eyes before he answered. "Because I need to understand who he's working with," he replied simply. "Your ex isn't clever enough to orchestrate this alone, and I suspect a rival organization is using him to access my accounts." Outside, the first hints of dawn lightened the horizon, marking a full night spent unraveling the web of deception her former fiancé had woven. Olivia felt exhausted yet strangely alert, adrenaline keeping her mind sharp despite the lack of sleep. "You have 2 choices," Dominic said finally, standing to refill his glass. "Walk away now. I'll provide enough evidence to keep you clear of any charges when this implodes. Or help me expose him and his partners, under my protection." The logical choice was obvious. Take the evidence and run. Rebuild her life somewhere far from this dangerous world of criminal enterprises and betrayal. Yet something deeper pulled at her, a desire for justice mingled with the intoxicating rush of stepping outside her carefully controlled existence. 3 days later, Olivia returned to her accounting firm wearing Dominic's claimed status like invisible armor. Their public appearances together had already generated enough gossip to reach her workplace, colleagues casting curious glances as she passed. Her desk phone rang precisely at noon, Dominic's voice on the other end sending an unexpected thrill through her despite the circumstances. "Your ex made contact with someone after seeing us together," he informed her without preamble. "We need to accelerate our timeline. The restaurant where they met for lunch screamed old-world wealth and exclusivity, the kind of establishment that didn't print prices on menus and required membership for reservations." Dominic introduced her to 2 men whose respectful deference spoke volumes about his position. Olivia listened carefully as they discussed coded business matters, gradually understanding that her presence served dual purposes, establishing her connection to Dominic, while allowing her accounting expertise to interpret the financial discussions happening around her. The business vocabulary shifted subtly when they addressed her directly, testing her knowledge of legitimate finance while communicating illicit operations in plain sight. Olivia caught the double meanings easily, surprising Dominic's associates with her quick adaptability to their world. One man, introduced only as Paolo, watched her with particular interest throughout lunch, his assessment more clinical than threatening. Later, Dominic explained he was the family's security specialist, responsible for vetting anyone who entered their inner circle. "You passed his inspection," Dominic remarked as they left the restaurant, a hint of amusement coloring his tone. "Paolo rarely approves of anyone on first meeting. He says you have honest eyes, but a strategist's mind, an unusual combination he finds intriguing. The Cardini family has taken notice of you," Dominic warned later as they walked along Central Park's edge, his security detail maintaining a discreet distance behind them. "They're the organization I suspect your ex is dealing with, and they don't appreciate variables." A black SUV slowed beside them momentarily before continuing down Fifth Avenue, the tinted windows concealing its occupants, but the message clear enough. Olivia instinctively moved closer to Dominic, the line between acting and genuine seeking of his protection beginning to blur. That evening, she found her apartment door slightly ajar, though nothing inside appeared disturbed. The invasion of her private space sent ice through her veins, the implied threat more effective than any explicit warning could have been. Within an hour, Dominic's men had packed her essential belongings and relocated her to a secure building owned by his family. The efficiency with which her life was dismantled and reconstructed was both impressive and unsettling. "You'll stay in the guest suite," Dominic instructed, showing her through an elegantly appointed apartment adjacent to his own. "My household staff has been with my family for years. You can trust them, but share no details about our arrangement." Her new temporary home offered luxury beyond anything she'd experienced, yet functioned essentially as a gilded cage. Bulletproof windows, security personnel in the lobby, and restricted elevator access ensured her safety while limiting her independence. Each morning, a car delivered her to work with a security detail that remained nearby throughout the day. Each evening, the same car returned her to Dominic's building, where they often shared dinner, discussing the latest developments in their investigation. Dominic's world operated by different rules, with its own justice system and power structure that existed parallel to legitimate society. Olivia found herself adapting with surprising ease, her analytical mind appreciating the brutal efficiency of his organization. "Your ex made a large transfer yesterday," Dominic informed her one evening, laptop open between them on the dining table. "The money moved through 3 shell companies before disappearing into an account we can't trace yet." Olivia recognized the transaction pattern immediately. It mirrored techniques she'd observed in financial fraud cases during her professional training. "This is sophisticated," she admitted, pointing out details only someone with her expertise would notice. "He definitely has professional help." The lines between their pretend relationship and something genuine grew increasingly blurred as days stretched into weeks. Dominic's protective instincts extended beyond their original arrangement, his touch lingering longer than necessary when helping her from the car or guiding her through crowded spaces. The email arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, sent directly to her work account from an anonymous address. "Ask your new boyfriend about June 17th, 2018, it read simply, followed by an attachment containing newspaper articles about a warehouse explosion that had killed 3 people. Olivia's research uncovered disturbing connections. The warehouse had belonged to a rival organization. The explosion officially ruled an accident despite suspicious circumstances. The date marked Dominic's ascension to leadership within his family's hierarchy. When confronted, Dominic neither confirmed nor denied involvement, his expression unreadable as he studied her from across his office. "You knew who I was when you agreed to this arrangement," he reminded her, voice deliberately neutral. The harsh reality of his world crashed through the romantic haze that had been building between them. Olivia spent a sleepless night questioning her own judgment, wondering how she'd become so entangled in a life she would have found abhorrent just months ago. Morning brought clarity along with unexpected visitors. 2 FBI agents waiting beside her regular car, credentials extended as they requested she accompany them for questioning. Her driver made a discreet call before allowing her to leave with them. The federal building downtown was intimidating by design. the interview room sparse and utilitarian compared to the luxury she'd grown accustomed to. Agent Phillips laid out photographs of her with Dominic, alongside financial records from her ex-fiancé's accounts. "We've been building a case against both organizations for years," the female agent explained, offering Olivia immunity in exchange for cooperation. "We know you're caught in the middle, and we can protect you if you help us." Olivia maintained calm as she listened, realizing with startling clarity that she was now a valuable asset to multiple powerful entities. The agents revealed information about her ex's cooperation with authorities, painting him as an informant rather than a thief. As the questioning continued, inconsistencies in the agent's narrative began to emerge. Their knowledge of certain transactions didn't align with what Olivia had learned from Dominic's records, and their timeline of events contained subtle but significant discrepancies. "I'd like to speak with my attorney before continuing," she finally stated, using the phrase Dominic had instructed her to employ if ever detained. The request was procedural magic, immediately halting the interview despite the agent's obvious frustration. The lawyer, who arrived within the hour, was clearly Dominic's representative, though nothing in his demeanor or credentials suggested mob connections. His expertise in financial law provided legitimate grounds to end the interview and secure Olivia's release. Outside the federal building, the same black SUV that had menaced them weeks earlier waited across the street. This time the back window lowered enough to reveal her ex-fiancé in the passenger seat, his expression a mix of triumph and fear before the vehicle pulled away. "It was a setup," Olivia told Dominic later, pacing his penthouse living room. "Those weren't real FBI agents. The credentials looked authentic, but Agent Phillips mispronounced the name of the financial task force he claimed to lead." Dominic's response was measured, but she could sense the cold fury beneath his controlled exterior. "Your ex is working with the Cardini family to trap both of us," he concluded. "They're using him to create a paper trail that would implicate me in financial crimes while framing you as an accomplice." The realization that she'd been targeted by two rival criminal organizations, and potentially real federal authorities, left Olivia feeling dangerously exposed. Everything she'd built professionally could collapse under the weight of these false accusations. That night, she accessed her firm's secure server remotely, downloading evidence of her legitimate work history while leaving digital breadcrumbs that would help distinguish her authentic activities from the forgeries. The timestamps and access patterns would create a defensible timeline if scrutinized in court. Dominic's technical team worked alongside her, capturing digital signatures from the fake federal agents' credentials to trace their true origins. The sophisticated counterfeit suggested government-grade equipment, raising disturbing questions about potential corruption within actual agencies. "We've identified their vehicle through traffic cameras," Dominic's intelligence officer reported near midnight, displaying footage of the black SUV entering a private garage owned by a shell corporation. The property traces back to the Cardini family's legal counsel through 3 layers of separation. That night, Dominic's security protocols shifted dramatically. New men appeared in the building lobby, communication devices were switched, and electronic sweeps conducted throughout both their living spaces. The tension was palpable as Dominic's organization prepared for conflict. "We need to draw them out," Dominic explained, spreading blueprints across his desk while his lieutenants listened intently. "The Cardini family won't stop with failed entrapment, and your ex is now a liability they'll want to eliminate once he's served his purpose." Olivia suggested using her financial expertise to create a convincing paper trail that would appear to be Dominic transferring assets in preparation for leaving the country. The strategy would force their enemies to accelerate their plans rather than risk losing their target. The bait was set through careful information leaks, a private jet booking, overseas property inquiries, and substantial currency conversions that would signal to watchful eyes that Dominic was preparing to flee with his wealth. Olivia's fingerprints were deliberately left on these transactions. Within 48 hours, surveillance identified increased activity around both Dominic's legitimate businesses and Olivia's workplace. Unknown vehicles maintained distant observation points, while digital intrusions probed their financial networks with growing urgency. "They've taken the bait," Dominic confirmed after reviewing reports from his intelligence team. "Tonight they'll make their move, likely targeting the warehouse where they believe I'm consolidating physical assets before transport." Preparation for the confrontation transformed Dominic into someone Olivia barely recognized. Gone was the sophisticated businessman, replaced by a strategic commander who issued orders with cold efficiency while strapping weapons beneath his tailored jacket. "You'll remain here under maximum security," he instructed, his tone leaving no room for debate as he prepared to leave. "If I don't return by dawn, My second-in-command has instructions to get you out of the country with new identification. Olivia agreed reluctantly, understanding the logic, but hating the passivity of her role, just when she'd begun to find her strength in this dangerous new world. As Dominic turned to leave, she caught his arm, surprising them both with the intensity of her concern. The kiss that followed wasn't part of any strategy or pretense. It was raw and honest, acknowledging the genuine connection that had formed between them, despite the chaos surrounding their relationship. When they separated, something had shifted irrevocably. Hours passed with excruciating slowness, the penthouse silent except for occasional updates delivered through secure channels by Dominic's remaining security team. The warehouse confrontation was underway, with reports of gunfire and explosions reaching them in fragmented bursts. Just after midnight, an unauthorized elevator override sent Olivia's security detail rushing to defensive positions. Her ex-fiancé emerged alone when the doors opened, hands raised in apparent surrender, though his eyes held calculating determination rather than defeat. "They'll kill me once they have Dominic," he blurted, before the guards could restrain him, desperation evident in his voice. "I can help you save him if you trust me one last time. They changed locations at the last minute, and he's walking into a trap." Her ex clutched a burner phone, displaying text messages that appeared to be from inside Dominic's operation, detailed coordinates and security rotations that only someone with intimate knowledge of the night's plan would possess. The timestamp showed they were sent just 30 minutes earlier. "I was supposed to deliver this information then disappear," he admitted, desperation making him reckless with truth. "The Cardenas promised me protection and a new identity, but I overheard them discussing my elimination once Dominic is captured." One of Dominic's guards verified the phone's messages, confirming they matched their operations parameters too closely to be coincidental. "Someone inside is feeding them information," he concluded grimly, the revelation sending a ripple of tension through the security team. Olivia's instinct screamed deception, yet the specific details he provided about the ambush location contained information that hadn't been made public. Against the security team's adamant objections, she made the fateful decision to accompany her ex to the new location. The drive to the waterfront district was tense with unspoken accusations, her ex alternating between nervous justifications of his actions and urgent updates about Dominic's situation. The industrial complex they approached was dark, except for distant flashes of light that might have been gunfire. The security team following in a separate vehicle lost them in the maze of shipping containers and abandoned warehouses that dominated this section of the port. Olivia realized too late that her ex had deliberately led them through a route designed to separate her from protection. "Just a little further," he urged, guiding her toward a warehouse at the far end of the complex. The victorious gleam in his eyes when he glanced back confirmed what she already suspected. There was no rescue mission, only a carefully orchestrated trap. Inside the warehouse, members of the Cardini family waited rather than the ambush scene he'd described. Their leader, an elegantly dressed woman in her 50s with calculating eyes, applauded softly as Olivia was brought before her like an offering. "Finally, we meet the accountant who charmed two opposing sides," the woman remarked, circling Olivia with evaluative interest. "You've become quite the valuable commodity in our little war, the woman who knows everyone's secrets." Olivia's ex preened under the approval, explaining how he'd manipulated her trust from the beginning. "She had access to Dominic's financial records for weeks," he boasted. "With her credentials, we can empty his accounts before anyone realizes what's happened." The Cardini matriarch smiled thinly, then nodded to one of her men who immediately stepped forward and shot Olivia's ex without warning. He collapsed with a look of betrayal, the woman calmly stepping over his body to approach Olivia directly. "Never trust a traitor," she advised conversationally, as if discussing business etiquette rather than murder. "Your former fiancé served his purpose, but a man who betrays one partner will inevitably betray the next." Before Olivia could respond, gunfire erupted outside the warehouse, followed by shouts and the unmistakable sound of Dominic's voice issuing commands. The woman's expression shifted from confidence to calculation as she quickly assessed her changing options. "It seems we've underestimated your new boyfriend's resources," she remarked with grudging respect. "Perhaps we should negotiate rather than eliminate each other and leave the market open for outside competitors." The warehouse doors burst open to reveal Dominic at the head of his men, his expression darkening when he saw Olivia held at gunpoint by the Cardini lieutenant. The standoff pulsed with lethal potential as both sides aimed weapons across the concrete expanse. Among Dominic's men stood Paolo, who moved with silent efficiency to strategic positions around the warehouse perimeter. His eyes met Olivia's briefly, conveying a silent message of patience as he assessed angles and distances with professional precision. Behind the Cardini matriarch, Olivia noticed an unexpected figure, the hotel manager from her ex's wedding reception, now dressed in tactical gear rather than his formal uniform. The pieces clicked together, the isolated table assignment, the security personnel disguised as waitstaff. The trap had been set in motion even before Dominic approached her that night. Smoke canisters suddenly deployed from multiple points, filling the warehouse with dense white clouds that obscured vision without affecting breathing. The tactical advantage shifted instantly as Dominic's men activated infrared equipment while the Cardini forces hesitated in confusion. "This isn't personal," the Cardini woman called out, maintaining remarkable composure despite her compromised position. "The territory dispute can be settled without further bloodshed. Your accountant for my safe passage." To everyone's surprise, Olivia spoke up before Dominic could respond. "There's something all of you have overlooked," she announced, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I've been documenting everything since the wedding. Insurance policies transmitted to secure locations that will activate if either of us disappears." The revelation landed like a bomb in the tense atmosphere, both crime families suddenly re-evaluating the accountant they'd dismissed as merely a pawn in their power struggle. Dominic's expression shifted from concern to something approaching pride as he realized her strategy. "Check her phone," Olivia suggested calmly to the woman still holding her captive. "The app that looks like a standard calculator contains financial records implicating both families in enough criminal activity to put everyone here away for decades." As the Cardini matriarch's lieutenant examined the device, his concerned expression confirmed Olivia's claim. What they couldn't know was that she'd created the hidden files only hours earlier as a contingency plan, gambling that neither family would risk calling her bluff. The balance of power had shifted subtly but significantly. Olivia was no longer merely leverage to be used against Dominic, but a third force with her own considerable power to destroy both organizations if harmed. The Cardini woman recognized the new reality with a diplomat's adaptability. Dawn broke over the harbor as representatives from both families negotiated terms on neutral ground. The warehouse incident reframed as an unfortunate misunderstanding rather than the near-fatal confrontation it had been. Olivia observed the proceedings with new clarity, recognizing the delicate choreography of power. "You risked everything coming here tonight," Dominic said quietly, when they finally had a moment alone, his voice balanced between admiration and residual anger. "That contingency plan with the phone was brilliant, but you could have been killed before revealing it." Olivia studied his face, noting the fresh cut above his eyebrow and the carefully controlled exhaustion in his stance. "I made my choice when I kissed you," she answered simply, "and I wasn't going to let you face this alone." The truce established between the families was fragile but pragmatic. Clearly defined territories, non-interference in specified businesses, and mutual protection against federal investigation. Most importantly, Olivia's name was cleared of all fabricated financial crimes. Her ex's body had disappeared during the negotiations, another casualty in the underground war that would never make headlines or police reports. Olivia felt a complex mixture of emotions about his fate, not grief exactly, but a somber acknowledgement of how thoroughly he'd destroyed himself. Back at Dominic's penthouse, reality began asserting itself as adrenaline faded. Olivia faced the undeniable truth that she now stood at a crossroads with no possibility of returning to her former life, regardless of which path she chose moving forward. "You have options," Dominic told her, pouring them both drinks as sunrise painted the Manhattan skyline in gold and rose. "My connections can provide you with a new identity, substantial resources, and relocation anywhere in the world." The offer was generous and practical, a clean break that would ensure her safety, while allowing her to rebuild far from the dangerous world she'd glimpsed. She could return to accounting, perhaps open her own firm in some distant city where no one knew her name. "And if I don't want to disappear?" Olivia asked, meeting his gaze directly. The question hung between them, loaded with implications neither had voiced during their whirlwind alliance. Dominic set down his glass, approaching her with deliberate steps. "Then you stay," he said simply, "not as my accountant or pretend girlfriend, but as my equal partner in everything. Business, life, future." The proposition should have terrified her. It meant embracing a world of shadow economies, power struggles, and constant vigilance. Yet Olivia recognized that returning to her ordinary existence would feel like sleepwalking after experiencing such intense, authentic living. I won't pretend it's an easy life, Dominic continued, taking her hands in his. But together we could build something extraordinary, legitimate businesses alongside the family operations, gradually transitioning toward a legacy we could both be proud of. He outlined his vision of international investment portfolios, real estate development in emerging markets, and technology ventures that could operate in full daylight. The criminal enterprises would shrink proportionally as legitimate wealth grew, a multi-generational transition planned with meticulous attention to detail. I've watched families like mine disappear because they couldn't adapt, Dominic explained, passion evident in his voice. They clung to old methods while the world changed around them, too proud or short-sighted to evolve beyond their criminal origins. Olivia recognized the business acumen behind his strategy: risk diversification, market adaptation, and long-term sustainability principles that any Fortune 500 company would approve. The only difference was the starting point: transforming shadow money into legitimate wealth through carefully structured transitions. Olivia considered his vision, seeing the practical wisdom in it. Criminal empires couldn't survive indefinitely in the modern era of digital tracking and global law enforcement cooperation. Evolution was necessary for survival, and who better to architect that transformation than someone with her financial expertise? We barely know each other, she pointed out, though her tone lacked conviction. This whole relationship started as a strategic alliance at a wedding I only attended to prove I was over my ex. Dominic smiled, the expression transforming his usually guarded features. Some people spend lifetimes together and never experience what we've shared in these few weeks, he countered. Crisis reveals character more honestly than years of casual interaction ever could. The choice crystallized with unexpected clarity. She could return to a safe life that now felt hollow, or embrace this dangerous new world with a man who had shown her more respect and honesty in weeks than her ex had in years. The decision, when it came, felt less like a leap of faith and more like recognition of a truth she'd already accepted. "I'll stay," Olivia said, stepping into the embrace of the mafia boss who had whispered, "Act like you're with me," at a wedding where she'd sat alone, never imagining those words would transform her life so completely. But we do this my way, building something that lasts beyond either of us. Thank you all for following this story. If you're enjoying it, write in the comments which place you're watching this story from, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the video, as your support is important for me to continue here.